Hi guys, Crimson here from Redzone and the Pubcast. Today I'm just going to be breaking down one of the PUBG Online Showdown series games from last night, specifically game 20 of the 20 season split, so the very final game. First of all, let's look at the positions of the teams coming into this game. So we can see that FaZe Clan have got first place, Team Crimson second, Penta third, Liquid fourth, and Vanguard fifth. So it's worth keeping this in mind. Obviously we need to check their positioning, how they move, because they're the ones really fighting for the money in this game. Okay, so it's a pretty normal playing path, and we'll just have a quick look where our top 5 teams are right now. Liquid in Yaz, as normal. Crimson are on the move on the east side up to Stalber and Kremeshki, which is pretty standard for them. FaZe in Milta Power, and Penta have dropped to Farm, split across the south side of the coast, and finally a Vanguard in North George. So everything's pretty normal. This is a pretty standard split for the Showdown series where everybody kind of knows and expects where other teams are going to be. So everyone starts moving into the circle. Keep an eye on Tindergold here as they've secured a pretty central compound early on. Everybody else starts to move in, and generally they're focusing here on getting a central location in this circle. You can see on the west side there's pretty much nobody west of the two guys from Diamond Dogs there, Tomil and Lux. And this is generally, I think, because this idea of the hard shifts that people talk about a lot at the moment, with the circle moving, or supposedly shifting hard a lot more than it used to do, getting a central location is even more important at the moment. So I think people are a little bit scared of this hard shifting. That's reflecting their little bit more central positioning than maybe they would normally. Circle 2 shifts north, which forces a lot of the teams south side of the river to have to make that choice and start rotating up. So this puts a few teams in some good positions here. You've got Liquid holding the bridge there by Yasnaya and the top of the lake, which makes it quite easy for them to pick off any rotations coming in. And Penta actually moving quite early on the south side of the circle here are able to get over this bridge without anybody actually catching them, which is lucky because, to be fair, that's quite an easy bridge to camp and stop people doing that. So they possibly scouted it out before, but they definitely take a risk a little bit by trying to rotate over that bridge, but they do it nice and early, and as a result it does pay off for them, getting them up onto the north side of the river. We can also see on the bottom side here FaZe rotating in. They don't really have a lot of choice. I think they know that Liquid are going to be around Yaz, but they also expect the other bridges to be camped. So they've got to make a choice as to what rotation they want to do. I'm a little bit surprised here that they didn't take their normal route of wrapping around the top of Stalber and coming in on the north side. Instead they choose to go straight into the city, and surely they know that Liquid are unlikely to be very far away from there. So it's an interesting choice of rotation by FaZe there. On the west side here you can see a number of teams that have come from George, from Seveny, from Zaki, and from Ruins as well. You can see this area here, there's barely any cover. Rotating across there in vehicles, people are going to know about it, they're going to see you move, they're going to know where you're moving to, and in a lot of cases they're going to be able to shoot you whilst you do it. Just focusing in a little bit more on this central area, you can see the number of teams trying to rotate through here as they try and look for somewhere that they can take in case of a hard shift north or east that's going to stop them from moving from the west side. They don't want to hang around on the edge of that west side because they just won't be able to get across this field if they have to head north or east. So they're trying to get somewhere that's a little bit more central so they can react to those circle changes in the best possible way. This rotation by Penta in particular, coming from the south side and driving up through the field, and you can sort of see that they're not sure where they should be going. As soon as they arrive in the area they start getting shot at. They have to turn around, they have to swing back round towards where Cup of Magic already has a little shack, and it's not the best position. It is in the open fields, as we were saying before. Just look at these teams surrounding them. I mean, they don't necessarily know how many teams are in this area, but they're going to know that a number of these compounds are taken, and that just puts them in a vulnerable position. In other situations, you'd easily see them getting 2-3 members picked off, potentially even wiped out for doing a risky rotation like that. But as it stands, nobody's able to actually connect the shots, and they managed to get away with it. Checking back in with our top 5 teams then. Liquid still in Yaz. They actually killed 2 members of FaZe when FaZe tried to rotate through the city, which has forced FaZe back out and around along that long rotation through Stalber and into the north side, which is a really nice rotation by FaZe. I don't know why they didn't choose to do that in the first place, but as a result they're able to get 2 of their members up into this north side compound. It's not the most ideal position. Obviously, if there's a south shift, it's going to be tricky for them to get from where they end up in this north compound to anywhere else in the circle, but at least they found a safe position in the circle with only 2 members, and they're able to kind of regroup and look at the next options when the circle pops. You've got Crimson in the same sort of place, holding these high ground, this hill area here. Penta we spoke about before as well, in a bit of a riskier situation in the center of 3 teams there. But right now they don't need to move, and as long as they can stay there, not over peak and not take too many hits, then they're okay. And the Vanguard are in a nice position, taking a compound, although they have lost some members, so it's a little bit trickier for them as well. Circle 3 goes northeast, but it's not a particularly hard shift, so it benefits most of the teams already in the center of the previous circle. You can see though someone like Method down in the south playing the edge, they are going to struggle to get in. Obviously from a spectator point of view, we know that there's teams basically covering every entrance into the circle, but it's also going to be assumed by Method, I would think. Liquid are going to be in Yaz. You expect that there's going to be people watching those bridges across the river, so they're going to be in a really tricky position here. So you could say this circle is unlucky for Method. It could have shifted down onto the south side and they could have been in the circle and they would have been in an excellent position. But at the same time, the position that they've chose here is very difficult if the circle doesn't land on top of them. They do come from Pachinki, they rotate north, and this is the kind of obvious position to enter the circle through. But this is where we see some of the teams like FaZe doing those really long rotations that bring them into the circle in an unexpected place, generally in a more favorable place than you would end up if you just take the most direct route. What I mean by that is Method here, when they saw the circle before this one, they didn't yet know whether or not it would land north or south of river, but more of it was above river than below. So you have to make that choice. Do we gamble on south of the river? Or do we try and do a longer rotation that gets us into maybe on this west side, on the 7E shooting range side, or even if they're really feeling adventurous, all the way north, like FaZe often do, going through Kameshki, going right over the top and entering the circle from the northern side. Now, if they do that, the circle could shift south and that could harm them. But generally, if you look at the probability of the circle landing north of the river in this situation, it is more likely to be north of the river than it is south. So by positioning yourself where Method have positioned themselves here, they really have limited their options if they have unfavorable circles. So if you're a Method fan now, you might be blaming the circle. Oh, we got bad circle luck. We have to move through Yaz or across bridges to get to the circle. But what I'm trying to say is that this is a choice that Method have made themselves by putting themselves in this position. And I'm not hating on Method particularly, it just happens to be the example in this game. They could have easily gone across the Rozhok bridge, for example. Maybe they had reason to believe there'd be somebody in Rozhok, possibly, but the Rozhok bridge there on the west side, they could have easily got into the circle there and had a much wider area to play into, to move into any circle that was north or east. And even if it was a south shift after that, they still could have moved back across Rozhok Bridge, maybe tanking some blue. They could have gone across and bridge camped other people trying to rotate into a south circle. They still would have been in a pretty good position. So these are the kind of choices that teams have to make. Obviously, we're looking at it from above. We know where teams are. We know that the west side of this circle is a lot less populated than the central side or the northeast side. And that's the element of RNG that you can control almost. You can pick where you end up in the circle before the next circle pops, more or less. And if you pick a good position, the RNG hurts you less than if you pick a bad position. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make here. Now, Vitality on the south side of this circle, at the gas station by the Aznaya Bridge there, they also have this choice to make, the same as Method. But they know, from having been in this position a little while, they know where Liquid is. They've heard them firing. They've seen the shots. They know where Tixu is on the other side of the Aznaya Bridge there. And they don't know probably how many people are in that compound. So they can't risk rotating across the Yaz Bridge and past him because they'll easily get taken out. So similar to Method, they're a little bit in a more difficult position. They choose to try and do a wider rotation, which is a clever idea. They try and go all the way down through Yaz, through the bottom here and up. And they do actually manage to get quite far through Yaz and into the circle. The other thing that they do here is split up. So Araxe actually just heads for a direct line into that small compound whilst Shiv does a long rotate. Now this is a pretty clever tactic given their position. they are trying to hedge their bets, spread across the two options. If Araxe drives straight into a team at this small compound in the south of the circle and dies, then it's not the end of the world because Shiv is still doing this long rotate. I think probably in the long term, something that the vitality tactic that they use here is going to net you more points unless you can win every single fight that you take, but that's pretty unlikely. The fourth circle is a hard shift to the south side. FaZe have rotated all the way down south. Mixie has stopped just inside the circle. He's going to snake there and play for position. Meanwhile, Fuzzface is driving straight for the water and to get a position there. Again, similar to what I was saying about Vitality, it is a placement play. It's a situation where they know there's still 15 teams alive and they're only 2 remaining without a strong position. They have made the choice that this is going to be the best way for them to get points. Meanwhile, Penta have actually kind of lucked out here because the other teams that were stopping them from getting in have moved on a little bit, and it actually allows some space for Penta to move, despite this being a very open area and not much cover. As the blue starts to come in, all these teams scattered across these hills on the north and the northeast side have to start moving in. So inevitably they start to fight each other, start to get picked off. This particular ending circle as well, on the west side here, there is barely any cover. This is a very open area. So these teams coming in from the west are going to struggle, especially with Tindergold in the center and this compound. So they're going to play as close to the edge as they can. They can't just be, pushing their way into the center of the circle because there's just nothing there. They'd be ending up, lying down in a field. So the next circle pops and it's a pretty hard shift over to the west. Now, when this circle popped, a lot of people were calling this a Penta circle and saying how easy it was for Penta now. But again, you got to remember that they rotated correctly, even though riskily, into the circle originally, and they've managed to fight off these other teams in this open area to get where they are now. So they've done a lot of work to take this from a very chaotic, very busy western side to a western side of the circle that they control. The opposite side to that is looking at the northeast, for example. There is a lot of teams up there. They are all scattered across those hillsides. And had the circle gone over to that side, it wouldn't have been a gifted circle to any of those teams because they would have had to afford the other 3 or 4 teams in the circle. So Penta have done well to take control of their sort of sector of the circle. So when the circle does shift, and it does shift on top of them, they already have control and they are able to then take that control and make use of it to raise their position, get kills, and get those points. You've got Liquid who've been able to sit on those rocks for most of the game so far. They're now actually going to have to move quite a distance across not the best terrain there. Crimson, the same for them. They're going to have to come down the hill and pretty much into Tindergold alongside the other teams that are scattered across those hills. And again, I hate to talk about circle luck. This is Crimson's choice to take that position, knowing full well that if the circle moves to a different location, they're going to have to move from that high ground down and into the open. Of course, they didn't have very many options. Tindergold took that compound early on. They couldn't move into that compound. They could have, pushed down and taken out one of those teams, pushed up and tried to take out one of those teams and rotated into a different position that would have just allowed them a clearer space to rotate when the time comes to rotate. And that's really like the key, I think, and something that I don't see a huge number of teams doing. When they're in a safe position, they play very risk averse, they stick to that position and they say, let's just hope that this position is good enough. You compare that to some of the best teams in the game, those teams are going to push and take positions that are strong. When they have to push, they'll push. When they have to fight, they'll fight. And when they have to do long rotations and awkward rotations and go all the way around the edges of the circle to get a position, they'll do that. They won't just sit in a worse position on the bottom of the circle because that's their only option. And I actually remember an interview with Drainus when his team won IEM when he was playing with a Vanguard, and he actually talked about this clearing the edge of the circle, taking control, where they would push around the edge of the circle, take out those snakes, take out those single members who are left on the edges, make sure you don't get caught in the back. And again, and I know I'm kind of going on about this, but this is the point I wanted to make with this video really. The reason I like PUBG, the reason I think it's an excellent game, and there's a whole tactical side of it, is exactly for this reason. It's not about where the circle ends up, it's about the position you put yourself in before the circle pops. It's obviously easy to blame the circle, and there are situations where sometimes there is nothing you can do. The circle is going to be in the complete wrong place, wrong time. You'll have a team in your way. There'll be no way to get there. But the way to come past that is to look back at the decisions you made before that point and say, did I put myself in the best position for all the possible circle outcomes? This next shift will be seen by some as a liquid circle and a gifted win as well. But looking at the situation that they're in, the position that they hold the strongest position really in the circle there. They're on the high ground there. They have sight over the whole circle, and it's worked out for them. They've only had to move west along the ridge and take these positions. But had the circle gone elsewhere, they were still in a very strong position to shoot down onto their opponents, shoot down onto Alliance, take out anyone coming up the beach from where Fuzz is, for example, if it had been a north circle or a west circle. And they would have had good eyes on Tindergold, for example, if the circle had gone north. So I think, again, it's about making your own luck. It's keeping that position that favours you the most, regardless of where the circle ends up going. In Tindergold's case, the only place that their position is good is if the circle is on top of them. If it's anywhere else, they have to move across the open. They don't have a lot of choice. They don't have options, and they're ending up dying as a result. It is easy to say you should have moved somewhere else, or you should have taken a different position when the circle doesn't land on you, but it's about reducing the odds of the circle being bad. So Liquid do really well finishing this out. They have a successful team fight against Alliance, leaving only Fuzz and themselves left, first and second. Fuzz knows at this point he's done everything he has to do. No point in giving another kill point to Liquid. He swims out into the blue to deny them that final kill point, knowing that he's pretty much secured first place for his team. I think this is a really interesting game. Hopefully you guys agree with some of the things I'm saying. Maybe you disagree with them. I'm sure there's people that do. Drop me comments, drop me some feedback. I'd like to hear it. Hopefully I'll do a few more of these if you guys like them. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and YouTube, where the videos will come out.